Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something honestly. How many things in your life are still on hold because you're waiting to feel ready? How many dreams have been paused until that magical wave of motivation shows up? We've all done it. We've all told ourselves, I'll start when I feel inspired, or I just need to get in the right mindset. But what if I told you that the very thing you're waiting for, the motivation, the spark, the energy, won't come before you move? It will only come after. Today, I want to flip the switch on how you think about action, momentum, and progress, because the life you want, it doesn't respond to your feelings, it responds to your footsteps. Let's talk about why movement creates motivation, not the other way around. Laziness is often misunderstood. It's labeled as a weakness, a defect in character, a flaw that sets someone apart as undisciplined or unmotivated. But what if laziness isn't what it looks like on the surface? What if the behavior we're calling laziness is actually a form of protection, a shield, a defense mechanism when someone says, I'm just lazy? They usually say it with guilt, with self-judgment, as if laziness is something baked into their DNA. But beneath that word lies a much more complex emotional reality. In most cases, laziness isn't the real issue. It's the symptom of something deeper: fear, overwhelm, perfectionism, or low self-worth. Think about the last time you avoided a task. You told yourself you were just being lazy, that you couldn't be bothered. But pause for a moment and look underneath that. What were you really feeling? Were you scared of not doing it well enough? Were you overwhelmed by the number of steps it required? Were you afraid of putting in effort and still failing? That isn't laziness, that's self-protection. The mind is a master at avoiding pain. It will do anything to protect you from discomfort. And because pursuing your goals often brings up emotional discomfort, uncertainty, doubt, the fear of rejection, your brain looks for ways to keep you safe. It tells you to wait, it convinces you it's not the right time, it says you're tired or unprepared. That voice is not laziness. That voice is your subconscious trying to keep you away from a threat. But the threat isn't real. It's emotional. Sometimes laziness is actually a response to being too hard on yourself. If your internal standards are so high that you don't allow room for imperfection, you'll unconsciously avoid anything that might expose your flaws. You don't want to start because you're afraid you can't meet your own expectations, and if you don't try, you can't fail. That laziness becomes a buffer zone, an emotional escape hatch. It buys you distance from the risk of feeling inadequate. In other cases, what you call laziness is really a byproduct of burnout. You've been pushing yourself so hard for so long that your body and mind are silently screaming for rest. But instead of honoring that fatigue, you shame yourself for not being more productive. You call it laziness because the world tells you that rest equals weakness, but deep down, you're not lazy, you're exhausted, and your body is trying to recover in the only way it knows how, by shutting down everything that feels like effort. And then there are moments when the lazy behavior is a result of decision fatigue. You're overwhelmed by choices, by distractions, by unclear goals. You don't know where to start, so you don't start at all. Your mind freezes, not because you don't care, but because you care so much and feel paralyzed by all the possible outcomes. Again, this isn't a lack of drive, it's a lack of clarity, and your brain protects you from failure by avoiding the decision altogether. For many, laziness comes from a deeper fear, the fear that your effort won't be enough. So you stop putting in effort, not because you don't want the outcome, but because you've internalized a belief that your work won't matter. You've told yourself, maybe unconsciously, that trying is too risky, because if you give it your all and it still doesn't work, what does that say about you? So you preserve your ego by not trying. That way, at least you can say you didn't fail, you just didn't bother. This mindset is not a character flaw. It's a survival strategy. It's how your mind protects you from emotional wounds, disappointment, judgment, criticism, rejection. Laziness becomes the mask that covers up your fear. The truth is, people who seem lazy often carry deeper emotional burdens than anyone knows, and labeling yourself as lazy only adds to that weight. It keeps you stuck in a cycle of shame and avoidance. But when you start to see that what you call laziness is actually fear in disguise, you can begin to treat yourself with more compassion. You can ask better questions. What am I really avoiding? What am I afraid might happen if I take action? What belief is holding me back? Because once you understand the emotional story beneath your inaction, you don't just fight the behavior, you heal the root. We often talk about discipline like it's a burden. Like it's this heavy thing we have to do if we want to succeed. It's treated as the punishment for wanting something extraordinary. But what if discipline isn't about control or restriction? What if it's about self-respect? When you respect someone, you don't lie to them. You don't make promises and break them. You don't keep showing up late or canceling at the last minute. And yet, people do that to themselves every day. You say you're going to wake up early, and you hit snooze. You say you're going to go to the gym, and you scroll on your phone instead. You say this is the year things change, but you keep postponing the very habits that would create that change. That's not just a productivity issue, that's a respect issue with yourself. Discipline is how you prove to yourself that you matter, that your goals matter, that your word holds weight, even when no one else is around to hold you accountable. It's easy to look focused in front of others. It's easy to act driven when you're being watched. But the real test of who you are is what you do when no one is clapping, no one is validating you, and no one is checking in. Self-respect shows up in quiet, unseen moments, in the way you talk to yourself after you mess up, in whether you let yourself slide every time it gets inconvenient, in whether your decisions are driven by your feelings or your future. Most people misunderstand discipline because they confuse it with perfection, but discipline isn't about being flawless, it's about being committed. It's choosing consistency over intensity. It's choosing to follow through even when it's uncomfortable, even when your motivation has disappeared, even when the results aren't immediate. People chase self-esteem like it's something that comes from compliments or external validation. But the deepest kind of self-esteem comes from integrity, from knowing that you can trust yourself, that when you say you'll do something, you actually will, not because someone else told you to, but because you made a promise to yourself. And you're the kind of person who keeps promises. You can't respect yourself if you're always breaking your own rules. You can't feel proud if you're constantly choosing temporary pleasure over long-term growth. Discipline is what separates the life you want from the life you're tolerating. It's not the grind people fear, it's the lack of immediate payoff. But discipline teaches you to invest in something bigger than this moment. It trains your mind to think beyond instant gratification. Every time you show up when it's hard, you prove to yourself that you're strong. Every time you do what you said you'd do, even when you don't feel like it, you build a relationship with yourself that's grounded in trust. And that trust is the foundation of self-respect. Think about how good it feels when you follow through, not just the result, but the energy that comes from keeping a promise to yourself. There's a quiet pride in that, a deep confidence that doesn't need to be announced. That's real self-respect, and you can't fake it. You either live with discipline or you live with the weight of regret, and regret is heavy. It sticks with you. Not because you failed, but because deep down you know you didn't give yourself a real chance. Discipline removes that regret. It lets you look in the mirror and know that no matter what happens, you showed up. You did your part, you fought for yourself. There's a kind of power in discipline that motivation can never match. Motivation is a feeling, discipline is a decision, and when you make that decision over and over again, even in silence, even in discomfort, you start to walk differently. You speak differently, you think differently, because you're no longer living based on impulse. You're living based on intention. So when people ask how to love themselves more, how to feel more confident, how to stop doubting their worth, the answer isn't always found in affirmations or journaling. Sometimes the answer is simpler than that. Sometimes the answer is this: do what you said you'd do, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's what discipline really is, and it's how real self-respect begins. Most people are waiting for the right moment, the right energy, the right mood, the right feeling. They say things like, "I just need to get motivated," or "I'll start when I feel more inspired." But that moment rarely arrives, not because you're lazy, not because you're incapable, but because motivation isn't something you wait for, it's something you generate, and it doesn't come before the action. It comes from the action. The idea that you must first be motivated in order to move is one of the biggest lies that keeps people stuck. What really moves your life forward isn't the emotion, it's the execution, it's the doing. Even when it's messy, even when you don't feel like it, especially when you don't feel like it, motivation is unreliable. It's built on feelings, and feelings are fickle. One minute you're excited, the next you're doubtful. You feel clear one day and completely lost the next. If you build your entire growth process on motivation, you'll be at the mercy of your emotions, and your emotions were never meant to drive your future. Your decisions were. There's something powerful that happens the moment you start moving, not when you plan, not when you think about moving, but when you actually move, when you take one step, no matter how small. Suddenly, energy that didn't exist before begins to show up, focus sharpens, confidence rises. Even if just slightly you feel different, you feel engaged, that spark, that subtle lift is not accidental. It's momentum. Momentum is what you've been mistaking for motivation. You thought you needed to feel good in order to act, but really, you just needed to act in order to feel good. It's no different than going to the gym on the days you don't feel like it. You drag yourself there, you warm up, you push through, and then something clicks. 10 minutes in, your mood shifts, your energy changes, you don't even remember why you didn't want to go in the first place. The activation of your body brought your mind into alignment. You moved first and your motivation caught up. This is true in every area of life. Whether it's writing, starting a business, ending a toxic relationship, setting boundaries, cleaning your environment, clarity and energy don't arrive before you start. They show up once you're in it. The problem is, most people overthink the beginning. They want to get the whole path figured out before taking a single step, but movement doesn't require a map, it just needs a direction. You don't have to know how it ends. You just have to know where to begin. Taking action, any action, breaks inertia. It pulls you out of the loop of mental noise and puts you into motion. And in motion, you build proof that you're capable. Proof that change is possible, proof that maybe, just maybe, you're not as stuck as you thought. Even the smallest action can shift your entire state. One page written, one workout done, one phone call made, one task completed. It's not the size of the step that matters. It's the decision to step. It's the refusal to keep waiting for the right mood. If you only act when you're motivated, you're training yourself to believe that you can't trust yourself when motivation is low. That's dangerous. It turns action into something conditional, something you can only do when circumstances are perfect, but nothing meaningful in life is built that way. Consistency doesn't come from perfect conditions. It comes from choosing to move despite them. When you act without motivation, you're not just making progress, you're developing grit. You're proving to yourself that you're not at the mercy of your moods, that you can lead your own life rather than be dragged through it by procrastination and doubt. There's something deeply empowering in that shift. You realize that you're not waiting on a spark, you are the spark. You're not hoping to be lifted, you're learning to lift yourself, and the more you practice moving before you feel like it, the more you realize how capable you've always been. You don't need to feel ready. You just need to get in motion, because motion builds belief, and belief builds everything else. And so, if there's one thing I want you to take with you today, it's this: you don't need to wait for some lightning bolt of inspiration. You don't need to have it all figured out. You just need to move before you feel like it, because every time you act, no matter how small the step, you send a message to yourself. I'm not waiting to live my life, I'm creating it. The difference between people who grow and people who stay stuck isn't that one group is more motivated. It's that one group chooses to move, even in the absence of motivation. So the next time your mind says, "I don't feel like it," answer back with action. Because once you start, motivation will meet you there. Now go, take one step today, not because you feel ready, but because you're done waiting.